Episode 44.
That's where you have to really dig in and really cast your eyes on why am I here? What is my vision? And you have to be unshakable. And there will be moments where that unshakable spirit will feel like it has left the room on you. But that's when you have to dig in. That's when you have to call other people that's doing what you're trying to do. That's when I believe mentors come into place. And that's what I did for me.
Welcome to the Govcon Giants Podcast, federal contracting for people on the outside looking in. If you are here to learn how to win a piece of the pie without getting your face smashed in, then you've tuned in to the right place. Now, the giant that not only walks the walk, but talks the talk, your host, Eric Coffie.
I want to take a brief moment to return the love that was shown to me by a few reviews on Apple iTunes by some of our podcast listeners. See You in Colors writes, eye-opening and so helpful. I recently found your podcast and it's been so helpful. Believe it or not, I'm in the DC area and the world of government contracting is still mysterious and overwhelming. Your podcast has given me encouragement to push through the noise and grow my business with government contracts. Thank you for being such a great resource of information and motivation. Data B writes, this podcast is not only great for DoD outsiders, but also veterans and retired military. As a retired U.S. Air Force acquisitions officer, I believe this podcast is a fantastic reminder that starting a business utilizing the skills we already have can be a very rewarding experience. Today's guest, Nichelle L, founded her information technology company, BreakForth Solutions, BSI, in 2012 after 20 years of working in management. The experience she gained at her former employer, General Dynamics IT, as a senior program manager proved invaluable when she finally decided to venture out on her own. To date, BSI has acquired nearly $10 million worth of federal and commercial contracts in the areas of IT, engineering services, program management, and management consulting. During today's episode, we discuss her first sole source contract, the 8A program, her first large systems integrator client, false evidence appearing real, the road less traveled, and some of the unique things she did on her road to 8 figures. We want to welcome our next Govcon giant, Nichelle L.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here this morning.
Yes, no, I know we had a chance to talk a little bit before the actual recording of this episode, and it looks like we kind of know each other from some of the same people in the same circles.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's certainly a small world, as they always say.
It is. You want to introduce your company and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My company is BreakForth Solutions Incorporated. We are an IT and professional services company. We specialize mainly in engineering, data and analytics services, as well as some professional services to include management and training consulting.
Okay. Now, I see here it says information technology, engineering services, program management, and management consulting.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Now, your background, you first got started, it looks like you were working for a company, SSI Services.
Oh, wow. You went way back.
Hey, look,
yes.
That's my job.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
This is my job. You know what?
Yes, you went way back, which is a great opportunity for me to share that SSI actually was my entrance into the intelligence community. My background, we started in the intelligence community, as you've noted, with SSI Services. And SSI Services was a company that specialized in facilities and maintenance. And so it was a large contract that was hosted on an intelligence community agency compound, whereas the organization was responsible for maintaining building in operations, snow removal. And so when I came on, one of the requirements of the contract was because they had union personnel, I was responsible as a branch chief manager of training and development to ensure that they had all the appropriate trainings each year and to make sure that they remain compliant with those trainings, forklift training, you name it. Manhole training. So I know a little bit about everything when it relates to facilities because of that experience.
That's funny because that was the question I was going to ask you. Is like, you said you implement organizational training programs. I was going to ask you, what type of training programs?
Well, for them, it certainly was facilities training program. So we would find out what the contractual requirements were that the government was mandating, and we worked hand in hand with environmental health and safety organization, and we ensured that trainings, like I shared earlier, forklift training, manhole safety training, and then it also went to soft skills because there was a number of people required to administrate the contract, and so there would be human resources training. There would be a lot of soft skills training that I had to administrate as it relates to effective communication, crisis management, risk management, because we would have those situations where if, someone got hurt, how did HR respond to, any inquiries from the government? Conversely, if someone got hurt, how did we go out and speak to their families, regarding that injury? So there was all types of training that I was responsible for ensuring that the employees had and that they remained compliant with.
Okay, now let me ask you this. When you said you had to ensure they had that training, did you get the training from somewhere and you taught it to them, or did you have to bring in specialists to teach the training? How did that work?
You know what? It was a combination of all of the above, actually. So
Okay.
I am instructional systems design certified myself. That was one of the perks of the job, is that they put me through all types of training. So not only am I ISD certified, I'm also a master trainer and certified in that as well. So it would be my job to ensure that if it was a subject that was not easily transferable in knowledge, or if it was something that had very specific requirements and it required us to bring in an expert, I was responsible for assessing those experts and managing the cost. We had a training budget, and then bringing that person in. It could be something that could have been done by video. So actually, all methods of training were employed on that particular contract at that time.
Okay, no, thank you for clarifying that. I was just wondering. I know some of us out here with small businesses, we have to do training for our staff and our employees. And I thought that since you had that experience, I wanted you to kind of talk about it and share with us. So from that, you moved on to General Dynamics, information technology.
Yes, General Dynamics. And that's where I spent the bulk of my career. That was such a wonderful experience for me because it allowed me to really solidify my project management experience. I think in every job that I've had, there were always elements of project management. But there, when I came to General Dynamics and was offered that opportunity, it gave me the ability to receive my program management professional certification, as well as to actually be a PM over contracts. And so there, I was able to really grow as a program manager and really step more into the IT role. And so at General Dynamics, I started off as a resource manager, really being responsible for ensuring they had the most qualified, cost-effective resources on some of their enterprise IT programs. And then from there was promoted to deputy program manager, where I was responsible for working with some of their subcontractors that General Dynamics was subbing to, as it relates to some of the other large integrators. And so maintaining those relationships and those employees that were assigned to those contracts. And then eventually I became a program manager and then a senior program manager closer to the, ladder of my career there, wherein I was responsible for a portfolio over $50 million, really administrating enterprise IT requirements. And that was working along with, again, some of our larger integrators that we were partnered with. So anybody GDIT had a subcontract with that was within that enterprise IT organization, that contract fell within my portfolio.
Okay, so you weren't an IT person. You weren't no techie.
So by virtue of being in that position, I had to really learn technical. So at that time, so I was more so on the network engineering side. So I was not a hands-on sitting on site administrating or designing networks. However, it was not beyond me to be on site, and I had an installer that had an issue. I would put on a hard hat, get on my knees, and go up under a floor or climb up a ladder going into the ceiling to see what the problem was so that I could articulate that to the customer.
Oh,
okay. So I had to understand termination of cable and, all of that kind of stuff, the difference between cable and fiber and Cat5 and all of that good stuff.
No, I could see that. I mean, I guess in some ways I'm the same like you in construction, right? The people say, well, what's the issue with the cost? And why is this issue? So I have to understand the terminology and what's actually happening on the project to be able to facilitate, to communicate that with the people. So, okay, that makes sense to me.
I enjoyed it. That was the fun part of the job for me.
Really? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I
guess you could get dirty a little bit.
Yes, love being out there with my employees and just hanging out and understanding what they do so that I could better understand how to serve them. Right. That was the key. If I didn't really understand what they did, it made it difficult when they had challenges and they would bring those challenges to me. I would not be in the most appropriate position to help resolve those challenges if I didn't have some, reasonable understanding of what they did on a day-to-day basis.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that I read is that you increased the FTEs by 500%.
Yes. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit, how did you, you don't have to tell us exactly what you did, but what were some of the, give us some ideas of what kind of things that you did?
I think if you're talking in the realm of ideas, the biggest idea that I always put out there and I will share with everybody is relationships are the currency of Washington, D.C. I'm in the Washington, D.C. market for your listeners. And so one of the things that I've learned really quickly is if you ever intend to grow any contract, and I don't want to just relegate it to D.C., but wherever your market is, relationships is really the currency. And so in order to really grow that contract, I had to develop good relationships, not only with the primes, but I had to be in the space and be visible. I developed relationships with employees, whether they were mine or whether they were not. And one of the things I did was I made sure that if I ever dealt with anyone else's employees, I always remained honorable. I wouldn't try to steal other people's employees, but if they had a problem and I was in the space and I could resolve it for them, I would. And I would leave it at that because I believe that when you remain honorable, people remember those type of things, know. Right. And so what I think the biggest reflection is that other employees from other companies would see me always out taking care of my employees. And then they would say, well, I want to work for your boss. She's always here. She's always responsive.
Right,
you asked for that yesterday and she showed up the next day with it, know.
Right.
And so I've taken that same model into my own company, whereas we realize that people work for people. People don't work for companies. People work for people.
Absolutely.
And so when you develop those relationships and you show them that you have a vested interest in their success, they don't mind telling somebody else, hey, we're open and we're hiring. I rewarded our team members for that as well, and still do to this day in my own company. We had referral bonuses. I recognized them in the open when they would refer people. So I can't say that I am wholly responsible for that number. I believe everything that I've done certainly has been a combination of teamwork between myself and those who were in my purview or scope of reporting. And so it was just a great opportunity to grow that contract. And I think, like I said, the biggest way of doing it was just maintaining those relationships, being visible, and being responsive.
Wow. That was excellent. What gave you the confidence to decide to go out on your own?
Oh, my goodness. Sometimes opportunities in your environment will conform and conspire to cause you to go out on your own. I will tell you that if it was left up to Nichelle early, I'm a loyal person. I would have set the GDIT until I was 99 years old if they would have, if the environment and the opportunities would have allowed for that. Right. But sometimes as companies begin to grow and as you begin to grow and you begin to have different aspirations, when you look around and there may not be the pathway to your personal aspirations, that's when you have to be open to allowing things to unfold as they should for you. And that's what happened with me is after a while when I could not see the pathway to the trajectory that I desired, which was to continue to grow and have a little bit more influence over the direction of the company as it related to how do we treat our employees? What can we do to invest in them to help make them greater? How can we put them in a position where they can achieve the same success that we're achieving, you know? And when I didn't see a particular trajectory at that time to get to that place, I then said, you know what? I want to build something where when people come, they know that it is a safe place. They know that it's a place where their ideas will be heard, where their innovations will be considered, where we're able to sit down and they can meet with their CEO when they want to, and their CEO has an open door policy, where we can do some creative things that can change the course of everything. You know, I always say success is about curiosity. It's about always being curious enough to be creative. And when you're curious enough to be creative, it breeds innovation. And innovation is what changes the world. And so I wanted to build a space like that. And so I would just say, you know, that's what led me to BreakForth Solutions today.
Right, right. That was your motivation. Now, what made you believe that you could actually build all these things that you sought out?
Faith. Absolutely faith.
There you go. No, that's great. That's a great answer. I love faith. I love faith.
Yes, it was just absolutely faith. And I will say faith coupled with when you're in a large company like a GDIT who has a great prowess of innovation and is doing great things, you're exposed to a lot of things that ordinarily you may not get exposed to in smaller environments, you know, right. in smaller companies. And the one thing I love about small companies is oftentimes they're very niche companies. And so you have the opportunity as in a small company to really become an expert in something because it's really oftentimes niche. Whereas in large companies, the benefit of being there, because like I believe they both have great benefits. The benefits when you're in a larger company is you get exposed to so many different areas of expertise. And so because of the level of exposure that they allowed me to have, it gave me a level of faith that was quickly, let me say this, a level of faith that was quickly punched in the gut when I started my small company because in General Dynamics IT, as a program manager, I had my own financial analyst. I had my own security person. I had my own contracts person. And all I had to do is pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, can you send me a forecast over da-da-da-da-da? Or pick up the phone and call security and say, hey, did so-and-so cross over? Can we call the customer and see? Whereas when I woke up one morning and became the president and CEO of BreakForth Solutions Incorporated, I didn't have anybody to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, can you send me a forecast? It was me. And that was a big punch in my faith gut because it was like, oh my gosh, this used to be so wonderful and great. And I had all of these resources. I had, for lack of giving away any of their proprietary tools, I'll just use, let's say I had a Govt at my disposal to look up something, whereas I'm sitting in my small business and we can't afford that, you know, at that time, you know, so I'm like, what are we going to do? What have I done? And so that's where you have to really dig in and really cast your eyes on why am I here? What is my vision? And you have to be unshakable. And there will be moments where that unshakable spirit will feel like it has left the room on you. But that's when you have to dig in. That's when you have to call other people that's doing what you're trying to do. That's when I believe mentors come into place. And that's what I did for me. How I overcame that punch gut in my face or that punch to my face gut rather is I then said, okay, I got a few little coins over here. I got to invest this in getting me an executive coach to help me because I recognized and realized I didn't know how to be a president and a CEO. You don't wake up knowing how to do that when you've not ever done it. I know how to be a program manager. I know how to be a training and development manager. I know how to be a technical recruiter. I don't know how to be a president and a CEO. And so it was investing, again, relationships are the currency of any market that you're in. It was investing in the appropriate relationships to help get me to that next place and to keep me when my faith felt like it wanted to just crawl up under my bed and not ever come out again.
I know those feelings. I know
Yes.
those. I've had those days. I've had those nights.
Yeah, and everybody has them. I don't care how big your company
No,
is.
we
And
all
it
have them.
goes from faith to faith to faith. I mean, every level of your faith,
Yes.
as you grow, your faith level has to grow,
Right.
And so, and at every level, it might have been punched in the faith gut at level 1, but level 2, you're going to get kicked in it. Level 3, you might have a tractor truck back over it. And you have to be conditioned to sustain those things, because business is not always easy. Sometimes we are guilty of making it look easy. When people go out and see beautiful Govcon Giants website, it
Right.
looks great, and people it gives people the appearance that it's easy, but it's not. And they don't sometimes, they say this in many other circles, they don't know the story behind the glory.
Yes, I like that. They don't know the story behind the glory. Well said. Well said. Now, when you started, did you have a backup plan if it didn't work out?
You know what? No, I did not have a backup plan.
No.
I did not. I did not have a backup plan. In my head, I was like, this is what it is, and I have to make this work. And there is no backup plan. I remember waking up many days like, oh my God, this has to work, because I don't know what else I'm going to do. I didn't. Because here's the deal. Before I started BreakForth Solutions, because I didn't necessarily, again, I would have sat in GDIT till I was 99 if they, again, if the environment would have been conducive for that, but it was not. And so I honestly started BreakForth Solutions by default. I never sat in there and said, oh, I'm going to start my own company. No, that wasn't me. I wasn't that person. So any backup plan I would have had probably would have been the plan before I got in BreakForth Solutions.
Okay.
So I did when I was making those decisions on what I was going to do. I did consider working for another large government contractor. However, I knew in my heart I was going to get more of the same.
Right.
Because it wasn't no big, bad, ugly reason, why I was looking to just make a change. It was this insatiable passion to see the best in people. And that's in all facets of my life. I feel like I'm born to do that, to ignite and to really throttle the purpose and the plan and the perfection in people. That's I believe truly is my life's call. And what better opportunity to be able to do that is in my own company, where I can call the shots and I can create the environment and make the appropriate investments to do that.
Wow. Now, when you started, did you have all the money you needed to get started?
Oh, no. Who does? Well, look, some people do. I didn't.
Some people do. Some people do.
Yeah, some people do. I didn't.
Some people do.
No.
Well, that's why I changed the way I ask the question nowadays.
Yes.
I asked, do you have enough money? Not did you have any money? Because you might have some money, but you might have enough money.
But I did not have enough money at all. But here's the deal. I did not arbitrarily make that decision either. So prior to leaving, when I knew in my heart, okay, I don't see a path forward. I can't figure out how, because I had applied to become program director and all of those things. And I'll just say it this way. I did not have an advocate. Everyone needs an advocate. I don't care what company you're in. You should always have that advocate that says, who is going to be the next me, and can I pull them up? Well, at the time, that environment did not have a situation where I had an advocate that wanted to invest in saying, I want you to become me.
Okay.
And I'll just say it that way. So because I didn't have that, or I didn't believe I had it, let me say it that way, that was what started me to say, okay, well, because I don't have that advocate that's saying, I'm going to pull her up because I can see her being me. And from that place, I could do and affect some of the things, because unfortunately, the thing that I hear from employees today, even when I personally call them from my company to recruit, and let's say they're hypothetically with some large ABC company, they'll tell me all the time. I'd say, well, what is really, putting you in a situation where you're considering new opportunities? And they'll say, I feel like a number in my company.
Yes.
Because they feel like they get lost. They feel like there's nobody to say, well, what are your career aspirations? Well, what do you want to be when you grow up? in a sense.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's a very good point.
And so, so for me, I knew that's what I wanted. And so I started having conversations with my relationships prior to just jumping ship.
Okay.
So I didn't jump out here without relationships in place.
Okay.
I began to socialize it with some of my trusted advisors, some of my, trusted, counterparts in the industry.
Okay.
To say, hey, this is what I would like to create. I believe my, passion is to do this. Would there be an opportunity for you to work with me? And so when I left, I had a contract waiting on me.
Ooh.
And that's what I would encourage anybody. Don't just arbitrarily leave and wake up, because as we know, the government cycle of business is a long cycle. They will tell you in a heartbeat, the government likes to do business with people they know, like, and trust. And so if you just wake up overnight and decide, okay, I'm going to start my own Govcon company, and you jump out there, you will find, as we shared earlier prior to the podcast, is the government is an ocean when it comes to their policies, rules, regulations, tools, technologies, and processes. It is an ocean. And if you don't know where to find this, that, and the other, it could be quite overwhelming. And so I've seen a lot of unfortunate casualties of Govcon, if you will, because they jumped out so soon and they didn't use the time wisely to get to understand the government process, know the government sales cycle, know how to read a forecast, know where to find information. Look at Govcon Giants podcast and listen to all the videos before you jump out here,
Right. Certainly. Not just watch one video.
Yeah, not just watch one video. Exactly.
I think you know everything.
To them. Yes. Follow up on the information, study the information, and make sure you have an understanding, because we've lost a lot of, in my opinion, innovative companies that should have taken the world by storm. Wow. Because they were out of timing. Wow. Or they didn't have anybody to say, this is how you do that. Or they didn't create relationships and have those relationships in place before they let go of significant income. Mm. So that would always be my encouragement, is establish those relationships early. Start having those conversations early. Go ahead and get your SAM in place. That can take a little bit of time these days. Have those things, in place prior to you just saying, okay, I'm out, No.
That's a very good answer. Now, you said when you started out, you already had a contract in place.
Yes, and it was a consulting contract, by the way. So it was not even a government contract. Right. It was a commercial consulting contract with one of the larger integrators. And because I'm still under NDA with them, because I still consult them today, I can't say their name. No, that's fine. But it was one of the larger integrators here in the Washington, D.C. area. And because I had relationships with them, because as a program manager, and for me, the bonus for me was, see, when you're in these large companies, everybody wants to be the senior program manager of the big, gigantic IDIQ, right? Well, for me, I was thrilled that I was the program manager of the subcontract portfolio. Why? Because I had 7 large integrators in my portfolio, and I knew all the PMs. I knew all their management. So when I left, it wasn't a problem for me to pick up the phone and say, hey. Right. And they knew who I was.
Right. You had a name. Yes.
Yeah, I had a name. So it wasn't a problem me calling, big, gigantic missile company and telling them that I had made the decision to leave. But because they had been working with me for some years, they're like, oh, really? Now, of course, they wanted me to come work for them. But at that point, I had already decided that wasn't going to be my trajectory. And so, while I was doing the consulting piece of work that I ended up getting, I was having conversations with a lot of them because I was not trying to compete to get the same work I managed back. That wasn't what I was trying to do at all, you know, and that was the other thing. I was careful to be honorable in all of my dealings.
That was my next question. You beat me to it.
Yes, because this industry is big, but it is small.
It is small.
Especially here in DC, and news travel, and you have to be very, very careful. So I was honorable and ensured that I didn't violate anything, you know, that was in place when I left my company. And so I asked for things that I did not manage. I asked for things that would not put me in a situation. I am very proud to say, when I left, I did not take one of my employees with me. A lot of people say, well, you should have took all your employees. I could have. Many of them called me, but that wasn't the honorable thing to do.
Okay.
For me.
No, thank you. No, thank you for sharing that. That's great information. So now we're not going to talk about the client because you have an NDA, but in 2014, you received your first large systems integrator client. Was that as a prime or a sub? Was that federal?
Well, 2014, that was my large consulting contract that we still have today.
Okay. So that's
my first Govcon, where we received a sole source for at $4 million. That was with the Department of Justice.
Okay.
And again, that came because during the time as I was consulting, and I had revenue coming in, thank the Lord. I was also doing what everybody else did because, again, until I got myself in a place where I hired the executive coach, I didn't know what to do either. And that's why my encouragement is always learn the ropes because, you know, I was going to every vendor outreach meeting. Oh my goodness. I went to like every agency. If I got that little pop-up in my email that said they was having something, I was there. In fact, that's probably how I met Lori and all the other people that we all know. We all kind of started out around the same time.
Yes, you did. Yeah, that's true. Very good point.
So we all were like at the same events, keep seeing each other.
But you know, it's interesting that you say that, and for all of those that know, she's referring to a former podcast guest, Lori Sales. You know, it's interesting because I had the same experiences with some of my previous guests who were in construction with me during the same era.
Right.
We were actually in the 7J, the 8A training classes.
Yes.
So, you know, I think that's how we all started, right?
Absolutely.
Attending all the industry events and going to every meeting where they gave out information and pamphlets. I mean, we all kind of start the same way, in the same lane, from the bottom, with no contracts.
With no contracts, no anything.
Right?
Yes,
That's great to hear that. That's encouraging.
Exactly. But as you continue to do that, you realize, okay, I have to hone in my energy here. Because if I'm spending all my time at all the events, you know, when am I actually building the business and working on the business instead of working in the business? And so then you have to really get strategic to say, okay, how do I streamline this? Instead of me going to 9, 12 different events, what are the top 3 events that really, you know, focus on my capabilities where I need to be at, that really honestly is selling what, you know, buying what I'm selling, rather. You know, and you hear that, and I can tell you that used to irritate me. I'm like, oh my goodness, you hear that same thing. But it honestly is true, you know, because if I'm spending my time over here at USAID, you know, and they're not really trying to, well, everybody's buying IT, so, but you know what I mean? Let's say they're not small business friendly, and I'm not saying that about USAID. I'm just using them as an example.
Right.
You know, I need to, as a woman-owned small business with an 8A certification, at this point, I need to be with agencies that are utilizing those versus agencies now that have mandates that say we have to use GWAX first. You know, you have to know those little tidbits so that you don't end up spending and expending your time, which time is money. You know, because you got to charge that time somewhere. At least I did, because, again, the benefit of being a part of a large company is when I set my company up, I kind of model after the large company. So we're a total cost accounting company, all of those little rules. And so I'm like, okay, I got to charge this time somewhere. You know, I got to allocate this time somewhere.
Right.
So allocate it to the things that's going to move the needle on your business.
Nice. And now, so again, going back from the time where you were attending the events to winning the contract, what did you do differently? What were some of the first things that you did? I know that you had the consulting contract that was paying the bills.
Yes.
How did you get to that point where you got that Department of Justice contract?
Well, I think the way I got to my first contract really was at that point I had honed it down to 3 agencies that I decided we were going to focus on, and Department of Justice was one of them.
Okay.
And so I spent a lot of time going to their events.
Okay.
But the thing that I think caused that, it's not what I think, it's what I know, was, again, my relationship with my executive coach. My executive coach at the time, she was a former 8A, so she knew some of the contracting officers in there. And so she made introductions for me.
Nice.
And off of those introductions, she told me point blank, you got to do the work to maintain these. Right. You have to. I've made introductions. She was like a butler to me. She opened the door, and then I had to get in there and maintain that relationship, keep those conversations going, following up, doing the work, being visible. And because of her, I was able to, and I credit it to her, and of course to God, allowing her heart to be in a place where she was willing to make those relationships, because sometimes people are not. Everybody's not willing to introduce you because they're scared it's going to take something from them. And I'm grateful that she was not that person, and that her heart was open and she was willing to make that relationship. And so it was a piece of work that initially I was like, coming from GDIT and being in the IC, I was like, we don't really do that kind of work,
I love that because, even with the people that I advise, I tell them the same thing. They're like, well, we don't do that. I'm like, oh my gosh, these people are going to give y'all a chance. Y'all better do this work.
Yes. And that's what I had to quickly understand, is that sometimes you have to take something that may not be in your core capabilities, but is doable. Now, don't take nothing that you can't do.
No. Right. No. It's aligned with, what you do, but just not the exact thing.
Exactly. Right. And in doing that, because the thing I had to learn real fast is this agency they do not know me. So they're not going to let me come in and just come off the street and start touching their IT systems and networks and change, They had to develop a relationship with me. And that particular contract, because we still have it today, by the way, it is a switchboard, audiovisual, and WebEx contract. And so it was it aligned nicely with our technical, capabilities. Again, it just wasn't in our particular niche. But to this day, that contract has been a huge blessing to the organization because we've been able to grow it. The people, I'm very proud of my employees that's on that contract, because when we got it, there were, some, minor challenges that needed to be, corrected, in which we were able to come in and make those corrections. And to this day, it's one of our best contracts.
Wow.
And it's one that our customer is pleased with. Our core absolutely supports us 100%. There's nothing I can't walk in the door and say, hi, this is occurring on the contract. Do you believe the government will be able to do X, Y, and Z? And if it's within her, scope of authority, she is more than willing to do it,
Nice.
Because we go above and beyond to support her reporting objectives, and it falls in her organization and it makes her look good. We're doing the mission of the program, and we don't have many challenges to this day,
Wow.
So again, had it not been for my executive coach and me having the wherewithal to know what I did not know, to know that I needed someone, because again, I didn't know how to be a president and CEO. And again, I came from the intelligence community. I didn't know anything about the FedCiv community. It was almost like I woke up and was in Greece. I was like, what is this?
Can you explain to people the FedCiv community, for those that don't know?
So the intelligence community, I'm going to start there since that's my background. The intelligence community certainly is that community where a lot of our objectives are classified, as well as we work for certain mission agencies, whereas our contracts and their requirements are not published on FedBizOpps or any of those type of things. Mm-hmm. Whereas the federal civil government community are more, and I'm going to use my terms, are more of your open agency where their requirements are out in the open. And so Department of Justice would be known as one of the federal agencies. They're law enforcement, but they're a federal agency operating within the judicial branch of government.
Okay. No, thank you for that clarification. Because again, a lot of people, they hear the term that every contract over $25,000 is published on FedBizOpps, and
and that is not the case.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is not so. For me, when people look me up, they see one thing, but they only see our federal open work. They don't see our intelligence work, because we're still based upon, because that's my background, we still have subcontracts and we still have requirements that we fulfill today in that community as well. And that is not published.
Right. By the way, just for those who are criticizing, we know that FedBizOpps has been now changed to beta.SAM.gov.
Yes, we do.
Just for clarification purposes, without those listening who are getting ready to ding us, we know better.
Yes, we absolutely do. And we have our logins, and they're active.
Yes, thank you very much. I still have my double authentication verification.
Yes.
Yeah. But now, so now what would you say? So since that time, you've grown the business, you're continuing to grow your business. I think you said you've done like $10 million worth of work now. What percentage of your contracts are federal versus non-federal?
So I would say that we are now at a nice 60-40, where 60, well, that's a hard question. No, it's not. I'm just going to say it and then we'll clarify. So I would say 60-40.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm going to say 60-40 is because when you think about a subcontract, subcontracts are considered commercial work.
Right.
Because the work we're doing is not directly to the government.
Gotcha.
So I have to be careful that even though we're supporting the federal government, sometimes I can blur those numbers a little bit, because in my head, that's Gov work. And then we also have consulting work, which is pure commercial work. I have to just try to make sure that in the pure intentions of the question you asked me, that I'm not mixing those numbers a little bit.
Well, let's
just for all intents and purposes, let's just go at 60-40.
Okay. Let's take out the consulting work. What does that leave you with?
Okay. So if I were to take out the consulting work, that would change my pie just a little bit. So I would still say, just trying to make sure I don't mix it up, I would still say we probably would be about at 70-30. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 70-30.
Okay. And then the 30% is the subcontract work.
Yes.
Okay. But you're supporting the companies who work for essentially the federal government.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say we're now down to about 10% consulting now.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. So that answered the second question. Because and I get it. The distinction is that the subcontract work is you're working with typically large organizations. I don't want to assume, but typically large organizations that are prime contractors for the federal.
Right. So my contract to them would be considered commercial.
That's correct.
Their contract to the government is considered federal.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so you got started. Now, let me ask you this. I noticed you started the company in 2012, correct?
So I founded the company in 2012.
Fair enough.
I didn't lead GDIT until 2014.
Okay.
So remember, that was what I was talking about, is taking your time. That's when I said, okay, I don't see how I'm going to get to where I'm trying to do. So let me just at least go ahead and put something in place. And so I use that time just as preparation time. I wasn't necessarily out pounding the pavement at all. It was just more, let me put this in place.
Okay.
And then I took the time to learn what a NAICS code was. I took the time, all of that, because otherwise you will walk into the sea of acronyms and not know what in the world is what, because we don't necessarily use NAICS codes in the IC.
Mm.
So I had no idea what that was. And if we were using them, it did not bubble down to my level.
No, right. Yeah, I was going to say, it never trickled down to you.
Right.
Oh, right. Now, so you want to say 2014?
Yes. So I would say 2014 is when we got our first commercial contract. That's when I left in January 2014, and I took a few months off, and then I started that contract in April.
I was gonna. So is that when you stopped getting a paycheck?
That's well. I stopped getting. So my timing was pretty good, right? Because it's a long story, but my timing was pretty good. Let me just leave it at that.
Okay, no, that's fair. I'm fair. Look, I'm fair.
Because when you're in management, you have certain bonuses and that hit at certain points of the year and all. So my timing was good. Let me just say it that way.
Okay. No, that's fine.
And my I started getting a check for BreakForth Solutions. My first one came in May of 2014.
All right, good. No, that's fair. That's fair. No, and again, I mean, I'm not, look, May, June, I don't think it's going to make a difference. I'm just, for all intents and purposes, because I noticed that you got 8A in 2016.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up. So that's how I got my 8A was I did the consulting work, and that spiraled out into other pieces of commercial consulting work, whereas I was able to apply for my 8A in 2015. And then we got our first 8A, we got 8A certified. We received that in April of 2016. And May of 2016, I was at the Department of Justice standing in front of the contracting officer briefing, and we were awarded the contract in June of 2016, and it started in October 1 of 2016.
Is nice. That's amazing. That's incredible.
Yes.
But
again, that was during the commercial time, doing my research. It was going to the events at the time. It was finally made enough money commercial wise, paying myself peanuts, my husband giving me the side eye,
Right.
because I needed to use some of my money to get me somebody to an executive coach and really to guide me and to help me in this new world of federal government that I didn't even know existed let me say that differently. I did not understand the opportunities that existed because I have always been incubated behind the wall of classified environments. Right. So I didn't know how. I mean, of course, I knew there was a Department of Justice, but I didn't know how to do business with them. I didn't recognize, all of the things that was going to be necessary, like, oh, what are your NAICS codes? Oh, do you know your PFC codes? I didn't have a clue what any of that was.
Right.
And so between 2012 in 2016, I was studying, I was preparing, I was talking to people, I was calling other companies that had jumped out there and had done it before me. Okay. In 2016, one of your prior guests, Miss Corliss Yodo-Ima, was one of the people that I spoke to. I was calling other companies that I felt were moving in a trajectory similar to where I wanted to go.
Okay. No, that's great. One of the things that you didn't say, how did you find your executive coach?
You know what? I found my executive coach through my play cousin, Guy Timberlake.
Okay.
We always say we're cousins. We just, we just both have these big, gigantic personalities. And so when we're in the room, people always ask us, are you all related? So we just started saying, we're cousins.
Okay.
So with that being said, though, seriously, Guy was actually one of the first organizations I reached out to. It was the American Small Business, ABC, something or another. I reached out to him
American
to get
Small
help.
Business Coalition, ASBC.
Thank you very much. So I reached out to him. So he was the first, and he recommended her.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was one of the first people proudly to say that I was in his initial wingman program.
Nice.
And so he was also very, very instrumental in my initial success.
Okay. No, guys.
Couldn't thank him enough.
Yeah, he's great.
Yes.
Actually, on one of my YouTube videos, I reference him for learning how to do PSC codes. Since you mentioned
Oh
PSC
my
codes,
gosh.
because the guy knows PSC codes, he knows all that stuff.
Yes,
He is
he taught me a lot of that, and of course, simplified acquisitions.
that's his
That
area
at
of
the time that
specialties.
was.
Yeah, no.
So yes, he's a wealth of knowledge that I just found it's just certain people that have played such a major role in my education of Govcon, and he's absolutely one of them.
Yeah, no, he's great. Now, let me ask you this. Do you feel as though from leaving GD, and I will say this, I had a friend of mine that he used to work at Tiger Direct. And so Tiger Direct, they would buy, he was similar to like what you're saying. He was a program manager essentially because he would, at a high level, work with the people who bought all of the things that Tiger Direct then resold to the consumers. However, when he left Tiger Direct, the same people that he could call upon were no longer picking up his phone calls because he didn't have any more clout. Do you feel like that happened with you when you left from under the GD wing, that now that you're out here on your own, that you were ostracized?
Actually, it gave me a lot of validation that I didn't expect. It was opposite for me. Yes.
Okay.
I could walk in a room and people would say, well, how long did you have BreakForth? Okay, well, I just started it at that point. So, I would say, well, it's 2014. I just started the company. However, prior to starting the company, I was a program manager with General Dynamics IT. Oh, okay, come on in. Because in their mind, oh, she obviously knows something because she worked for GDIT.
No, and
so
that's great.
It actually blessed me a lot bigger because I did expect for exactly what you described to happen.
Okay.
I did, but it didn't.
And one of the things that I look at is the government sector is totally different from the private sector.
Yes.
For example, I did some research and I looked at the last decade, right? I was going to make a YouTube video about the last decade. Do you realize in the last decade, the top 50 companies, only 5 new companies came on board to the government space in the last decade? The last decade, only 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can count them on one hand. Now take that and imagine a decade ago, who were the top 50 companies in the private sector for the Fortune 100, right?
Wow.
And let's look at who was there, who was not there. And so it's dramatically different. So that's good that you clarified that point. Now, so you felt everyone was happy for you. Did you feel any different?
No, I didn't say everybody was happy for me. No, that was not the case. Everybody was not happy for me.
Not everybody.
No, not everybody was happy for me. But I didn't focus on everybody else. I focused on me and the vision and the goal that I set out to accomplish. And I focused on ensuring that everything I did just to make sure that it was honorable and to not put myself in a situation where anybody would ever be able to say, oh, well, she stole that or she took that or she did that or she done that. And let me say, because I operated that way, GDIT actually brought me in and gave me one of my first subcontracts. Did
they really?
They did. So,
I was going to ask that question.
And because they watched me. They, because it wasn't like I wasn't one of their top performers. So, of course, they were going to watch me. And, of course, they knew what I had exposure to. And, of course, they knew what my accomplishments were. So they wasn't thrilled that I decided to leave either, so I didn't leave on bad terms. That's the other thing. I left with my relationship with my management and everyone intact, so to this day, I can pick up the phone and call many people over there and they will take my call.
Okay. Wow. No, that's great. That's actually a good thing. Fast forward to recently last year, you were part of a larger contract or a proposal that was won by Research Innovations. Can you talk about that and how did you get to that opportunity?
I certainly can. So here's the deal with that contract. That contract came as a result of my relationship with our contracts officer.
Okay.
So our contracts officer, had made mention, well before that, the agency overall was looking, he was speaking at an event rather.
Okay.
And he had made mention that the agency overall were looking at ways to streamline and come up with a vehicle to support their data analytics and services. And that would be something that would be coming, down the pike, the same old,
Right.
When the agency gives their forecast of things,
Yep.
he had mentioned that at a time. So, of course, because he's my contracting officer on some of our existing work, I inquired, sir, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And he said, well, of course, the same old contracting officer verbiage,
Yep.
we're going to put everything on the public facing entities, blah, 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 blah. But this, what I've said publicly is X, Y, and Z. And, so of course I asked about timeframes, and what he could share with me, he did, And so from there, when it did finally come out, we grabbed it, we looked at it, and all of a sudden in the middle of us, planning, getting our team together, I had made phone calls. Again, I had relationships. And a lot of my relationships from the IC had done the same thing I did, whereas either they left the IC and they've come, to, other companies, small companies, commercial companies, or they've gone to other larger companies that were more focused on FedCiv. So I had relationships where I could pick up the phone and, with people that I had worked with in the past and say, hey, Department of Justice is putting this out. I have it already. They just published it. Take a look at this. Let's, would you be willing to, be on a team with us? They said yes. Well, in the midst of it, Eric, the acquisition strategy changed, and they decided that they were going to put this blanket purchase agreement that it was going to ride upon the GSA IT-70 schedule. Guess who didn't have that? Me.
Wow.
So I, thank goodness, because of our IC work and our IT work that we've done and still continue to do today, I was able to call, and it is an act of God and all his angels to get past performance out of the IC. It just is. But because I had great relationships with my primes, those that could reasonably give me some form of past performance write-up, they did. And I was able to put all of that information together, give it to my GSA contracting officer. We did everything in our power to get that IT-70. Unfortunately for us, and I continued to work, continued to, call and make contact with team members. And so what RII, some of the principals there I had worked with in my past life, I asked them, hey, I'm not going to be able to prime this, would you all be interested in priming this and leading this? You all have strong capabilities. You're the one, and they committed to it. And needless to say, our IT-70 did not come until 3 weeks after the proposal was due.
Wow.
But RII is an exceptional prime. We're excited to, be partnered with them. All of our teammates are just absolutely amazing. And I just truly believe that, it's going to be something very special in the DOJ agency.
For all those, she didn't mention the BPA amount is $500 million.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I do my job on this side.
Yes. And so, and of course, that $500 million is a big pot, right? And there was a restricted pool and an unrestricted pool. So in other words, there was a large pool. So there are large integrators on that contract,
yes,
as well as small integrators. And so we're on the team again with Research Innovations. They refer to themselves as RII. And we have teammates on our team. And so the first task orders recently started coming out, or call orders rather. Let me use the right vernacular. I don't want you to get YouTube bombed at my offense.
Thank you.
They just came out, and so we're working them as we speak. And so we're just really excited about the opportunity to continue to support the mission of the Department of Justice and all that we're able to do with our team.
Let me ask you this. Where did you learn proposal writing?
At GDIT. Okay. That was one of the bonuses.
I read it in your profile. I just want to find out.
Yes, that was one of the bonuses that I received. Now, listen, when you're in it, and you're there and you're a program manager and they tell you you have to work a proposal, in that moment, I always felt like, well, why I gotta always be the one to go down here? I had no idea my boss was setting me up for today.
Yes.
No idea.
Yes.
At the time, I always felt like, oh, why he always send me down here? Why do I always have? But when I tell you, I went down there because I'm a learner. I am a lifelong student, and so I would sit with the proposal manager and say, okay, well, since I got to be down here, you might as well teach me everything you know. And I had this proposal manager. I won't call her last name, but her first name is Vicky. She would teach me things. She would show me how she did her proposal outline. She would show me how to, what they call shred a proposal. She showed me all of those things. So when I left, that was one of the things that I walked away with that I was able to use as a component of our consulting that really blessed my company.
Nice. Well, one of the other things that you mentioned earlier is your program management professional certification. Is that something that you would recommend for people to do?
So, program management. So, yes. I mean, it wouldn't hurt you. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
What I will say about that certification is what I've learned over time is that the government per se, particularly in the IC and the agency that I supported, they had their own framework, which was called PMF, which was Program Management Framework. And so it aligned a lot with PMI, but there were many cases where it didn't because of some of the approvals and control gates and different things that were required. So what I can say is I've never used my PMP in the pureness of what PMI intended. But when I tell you to have the knowledge and to understand the processes in the vernacular, I can step into any situation in any agency. And when they begin to speak about program management, I can understand because of my studying and the requirements of maintaining that certification. So that's why I say it would not hurt you. And it is something that I would absolutely, recommend. But I would not tell you that if you're not a PM, I wouldn't say, oh, move, heaven and high waters to get it today. But, what I would say is, if you find yourself in a scenario where you're going to be managing large projects, it would certainly be beneficial.
Okay. A couple of questions and we're going to wrap up. What do you believe is your single greatest attribute that's contributed to your success today?
God and faith.
Okay.
God and faith, I would have to say, because like I said, some days you're going to wake up and wonder, why in the world did I do this? And I've had those moments where I'm like, what have I done? I've had those moments where it seems like everything that could go wrong is going wrong. You got a program manager that might call and, tell you they're out sick for 2 weeks, and the deputy program manager, and you're like, oh my God, and then you got this contract over here, the customer wants something that's out of scope, and how are you going to deal with it? And how are you going to address it? Or are you going to address it? And some days you just have those things where you're like, oh my God, what have I done? And so you feel like your success is up in the air. You feel like failure is imminent, but, you just have to dig in and get that, what I call divine grit, and say, you know what, I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm born for this moment, and I'm going to get through this. And that's when you have to call people, those that that are going to speak life to you and encourage you. That's when you have to read those things that are inspirational. That's when you have to go back and look at other entrepreneurs and see how they made it through the challenging moments. Because I always say success is not final, failure is not fatal, but it's your faith that will always keep you afloat.
Wow. How often do you network with other small business owners now, even currently today?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
All the time. All the time. Like I say, relationships are the currency of the market. You're going to find yourself in situations where you need to have your network of small businesses to partner. You can't. I would love to prime every single thing on my own. I really would, but sometimes you might have that one customer to say, might be a little bit too big for you. But if you come back, like for instance, with the BPA, I wasn't going to jump out there and try to do it on my own. That we would have fell on our face.
Yes.
I had the wherewithal to call other small businesses and say, hey, this just came out. Would you all be interested? And, and like I say, I can't tout RII enough because, they not only had the wherewithal to be interested, but to then take the bull by the horn and say, okay, we will prime this. And priming costs money.
Yes.
And they trusted my word to make that investment.
Even putting
Thank goodness it paid off.
Putting the whole proposal together in the team. There's a lot of money invested into that process.
Yes. And as the prime, they took that on. So right. But they did that because they had a relationship with me and they trusted my voice.
Wow.
And they trusted my voice because they knew me and because we had a relationship.
We always hear about relationships and the importance, and you said it's the currency. Why do you think that so many small businesses feel like they're in competition with each other?
That because I think they don't have an understanding in their infancy that there is enough for everybody.
Okay.
When you start a small company, you are grasping at everything because you're doing everything in your power to keep the doors open.
Right.
And I think when we all come to that place where we understand that we're better together, and that everybody can eat and that there's more than enough, I think it is my hope that that pendulum will start to shift. That's the one thing that I strive to do in any relationship is I try to be equitable at all times. When we're in our dealings, when we start discussing work share and all, I don't come into it with this, I'm going to be greedy and I'm going to get the biggest piece of the pie. Let's do what makes sense for the customer. Let's do what makes sense for each other. And let's certainly do what makes sense for the employees.
Nice. Out of curiosity, this is a kind of an offbeat question.
Sure.
I noticed on your LinkedIn that you're part of some groups on there. Have you gained anything out of those networks?
So you know what? Sometimes, yes, there is one group. It's a contracts officers group.
I see the Project Manager Network, DTP, USDA, 8A, GSA group. If you could think about
the GSA group was good. The GSA group was good when I could, reach out, especially when Oasis was going on. Okay. People were easy, they were happy to give information. They were happy to answer questions that I had about, the proposal and some of the requirements. So that group was a good group, where you can reach out. So, and then some of them you just kind of join because, they're going to post every now and then, and the posts are good.
Okay.
So it just all depends.
And my rationale behind it is obviously putting information out here for people to know, to be able to have it. And these are things that are low cost, right? Low barriers of entry that they can participate in. So that was really the motivation behind the question.
Absolutely.
Nothing more. Is there a book that you recommend or that you've read that's helped you throughout your journey?
Oh my goodness gracious.
I'm sure
I
several.
have read so many books. That is such a hard question. Every time people ask me that question is because there are so many wonderful books out there.
I know there is.
For small businesses starting out, I think they should read The Billionaire's Playbook by Eric Coffie. And he didn't ask me to say that.
I did not. I did not ask you to say that, Nichelle. Not at all. But we were talking about that at the beginning beforehand. But
yes.
let's refer to another book because they already know me. So let's refer.
Yeah. So for me, I am big on reading my Bible.
Okay.
From Good to Great was probably one of the most influential books that I read in a very, very long time. It's just so many out there. I mean, I will tell you what I absolutely love as it relates to leadership is all of John Maxwell's books. And I would say from a leadership perspective, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was probably the most influential book on my leadership.
No, I love John Maxwell. I have a bunch of his stuff as well. Yeah, he's great. He's a great guy.
Yeah, so I love Jim Collins' work, Good to Great, The Eighth Habit by Stephen Covey, I
love Stephen Covey.
Yeah, so all of those books,
Hey, listen, no, those are our classics. I mean, those are things that they've seemed to last throughout the history of time, those books.
Right.
So yeah, no, I love Stephen Covey.
And What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Malcolm. I forgot Malcolm's last name.
Gladwell?
That one, yes, that was one I just read recently that I really enjoyed.
I haven't heard of that one. So that's a new one. What got you here won't get you there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing it down. Interesting.
Yeah, okay. By Marshall Goldsmith.
Okay. I like it. Thank you. No, thanks for that recommendation. What are two more questions, and we're going to let you leave. What are some of the common missteps do you see small businesses taking? Yeah, I mean, you're in the DMV area, so like you said, you see people come in, and sometimes they crash. What are some of the steps that you've seen or that you've noticed that happens that maybe we can help some people avoid out there?
So again, some of the common missteps is jumping out here and not understanding how the government sales cycle works. Okay. It is so hurtful when you go to things like the annual procurement conference and you see a small business come in and they ask a question, like they'll stand up and say, well, what is a NAICS code? And you can feel the whole room just like, and it's like any potential, and they might have a very excellent niche, yes, but they clearly were not prepared. Right. So I just say, be prepared. The one thing you hear this at every conference, do your homework. I hate that because to me, that doesn't give any answers. No. Do your homework. Well, if I knew what work to do or what homework to do, I wouldn't be here. It's just like, it irks me when they say that. So but I think the spirit behind what they're trying to convey is when you come to these things, know in advance who the audience is, what opportunities are you coming in here to talk about? There's nothing more hurtful when you see somebody sitting to the table beside you and the customer say, well, share with me about your company and what do you do? What are your core capabilities? Well, we can do everything. No, you can't. Nobody can do everything. Yes. And if you can, you certainly can't do them all successfully. Right. So, be concise, be clear, know what you're coming for, know what you want to do, and if it's one thing, come in and be the most confident person to articulate your abilities to do that one thing.
Fair enough. Love it.
Don't feel like you have to take on a whole bunch of millions of things. If you're good at one thing, be the best at that one thing.
No, I love it. One last question. What do you think in terms of experience share? Because I learned about experience sharing, how a newly formed entrepreneur could recreate your level of success today.
I like you just said, experience sharing, talking, get a mentor, talk to other small companies that's doing what you're trying to do. Now, I will tell you right now, everybody doesn't like to give information. They just don't, and it's sad. And let me also say, sometimes when you call companies and they don't want to give information, it's not because they don't want to. It's because 9 times out of 10, they're in the same situation you are, or they're just a little bit ahead of you, and they're still scrambling and scraping every day to keep their head above water just like you are. So, because I can remember times where I called people and just asked questions, and they made me feel like they didn't have the time of day for me. And then when I really got behind the curtain and realized they honestly didn't. They were trying to, I in my mind thought they were at one level. And then when I pulled the curtain back and realized, oh no, they're not, they're almost in the same position you are, Nichelle. Right. You know how your day looks. So, right. and I can't spend an hour on the phone every day talking to somebody. I can't.
No, I can't
I'm
either.
happy to schedule time. I'm happy to plan time, but I can't do that every single day at this level of business. But when I get to where I believe we're going, certainly that's on, my trajectory is to have more time to mentor, have more time to reach back and pull people up. But when you're in the throes of it, just like everybody else, it can be challenging, but I would always encourage everybody, never not do it. We owe it to each other to make some time for at least one small business that's coming up behind us to reach your hand back to somebody.
Nichelle, thank you so much. I had a great time.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine, sir.
Thanks for joining us back here. Before we sign out today, I just wanted to say a couple things. First and foremost, Nichelle and I are both fans of the book, Thinking Your Way Out of a Ditch by Abe Abrahams. If you have not already picked up a copy, definitely pick up a copy. It's the story of an entrepreneur who actually went through, started off as a small business, grew his organization to a large business, then lost a major contract and had to learn how to rebound, maintaining the status of a large business while not having the actual resources of it. Great read for all of those out here looking to go from small to middle to large business opportunities. And the other thing I want to say is what fascinates me about Nichelle's story today is how she left the comfort and stability of a high-paying IT position over at General Dynamics to jump out here into the unknown abyss of federal contracting. I find that fascinating that someone could actually have the courage and the strength to do so. And then one last thought, it's interesting because her and some other people that have been guests on my show actually are telling me how they're looking outside of the DC area for contracting opportunities. And what that does is it reminds me to all of you listeners that, again, when you are thinking that all of the contracts are in DC, really oftentimes they're right here in our backyards and under our boots. So just pay attention for opportunities right in your local areas. Thanks for tuning in today. If you love us, like us, hate us, please share our content, leave us a review. If you get a chance, if you've got a moment, definitely leave us a rating. Again, as always, the show notes, the transcripts, lessons learned will be on the website, govcongiants.com/podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode.